And next, I would like to show you basically an example of unlock, more practical example of something you might create in your work. So I'm here. Just gonna. Okay. Here we go. So let me go to perspective view. Now let's try to generate something like that. It will show on the screen in a second. So what I'm trying to create is I have some base geometry. Now I just wanted to show you that you don't have to work with the flat surfaces or flat grids, but you can also have any kind of a free form and populate your module or design on that particular grid. So all we're trying to do is just work with our model to generate something of that sort. If you zoom in, you see how there is some sort of variation. You see the thickness is varying here, and you're not creating a very uniform effect. How can you go about generating something like that? So in the next section, I will just walk you through the process of doing exactly that. So let's go to the top view here. So handling 3D patterns is what this is going to be about. That's my base geometry. It's the same as, you know, it's got that middle surface and it's got that outer frame. And you'll see that the first thing I noticed that the parameterization of that surface is not even. But I will try anyway to use my base surface domain number and see if that's actually going to be generating a grid that is useful in this case. If you look at it, you'll see that these grids at the bottom of my screen are much further distant than the grid at the top of the screen. And this is why, the reason behind that is that my surface parameterization, as I showed earlier, is actually going more towards the top than the bottom. So I know straight away that probably this is not the way or the routine that's suitable. However, the direction is going in the right direction. So let's use the domain length. And I'm using my surface, and I divided into, I don't know, 1.5 maybe in the U direction, 0.8 in the V direction. If the density is too much, I can change that to whatever kind of distances I'm looking for. Maybe keep it to 3 by 3. So that will give me an idea of what kind of grid. You see that this looks also like a trimmed surface because I'm getting grid outside. So let's say that initially looks like, you know, it's evenly distributed. That's what I'm looking for. Press enter to accept it. And let me run a quick test of how the panels look like. Select the panels, and then you'll see how these diamonds are shaping. If this is the kind of scale I'm looking for or not, if you see these diamonds are a little big, and I probably am looking for a denser kind of a grid in this case. So I'll escape that routine and use a grid utility that will actually change the density of my grid. So instead of having to recreate the grid, I can change its density. So I can select my points, and I say, okay, increase the density by 1 in the U and V direction, delete the input, and I select my base surface, and you'll see that my grid was created much denser now. If I try to quickly panel these points, and I'll look at it, I say, okay, oh, maybe that's the kind of density I want, or maybe that's way too much, you know, and then you can work back and forth to just create the one that you are looking for. So let's work with the initial density that we created here for these points. You'll notice that I wanted the output to be twisted. Like if I try to distribute these modules onto my grid, it's going to be parallel to the grid. We can go ahead and try it. Let me just move to the perspective view. To be able to better have a better look at my module, and it's going to update the screen in a second to see. That's the perspective view, and this is the module I'm trying to distribute. In order to be able to distribute a 3D module, you will need two bounding grids. I'll just hide the frame for now, and you'll see the thickness here of your green base. You can either regenerate another grid using the back surface. That's one way to do it. But if you want to enforce something, like you want the holes to be vertical, then you can simply copy your grid and copy it from mid here to mid here. And that has copied my grid to generate a base or a second bounding grid. I will change its color just so that I can quickly differentiate between the top grid and the bottom grid. I mean, even if I hide my geometry, you'll see these two grids that has been, two bounding grids that has been generated. Just like we mentioned in the 2D pattern, there are some built-in routines to panel the 3D grids, or the two in between two bounding grids. And you know, there are, again, just like we had in the 2D, a number of built-in patterns, and you can create your own. And you can say, okay, I want to add meshes, solid spaces, or edges. I group them. Same kind of option. So my first bounding grid is this bottom one, and the second one is the top one. Press enter, and you'll see how it created this partition, because we used the partition kind of option here to generate all these panels in between. As I mentioned, you can always use like boxes and other options to generate your grids. But in this case, we wanted some custom module to be populated or squeezed in between the grids cells. So what I'll do is I'm going to use the panel custom 3D. It will ask me for my first bounding grid, my second bounding grid, and if I had some bounding surfaces for a smooth population, we could use our geometry that we had, but just for a quick reference now, I'm going to pass on that one. It will ask me to select my module. Let me select that module.